and welcome back to the Collin Cadmus Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Walsh. Ryan graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1999, and then started his career as a category manager before getting into enterprise sales at ChannelAdvisor, where he worked his way up the ladder from director to VP to CRO over a nearly 16-year period, leading the company to $112 million in revenue and a successful IPO in 2013. After ChannelAdvisor, Ryan got into consulting before his most recent and current venture, where he serves today as the founder and CEO of RepVue, a platform that provides salespeople with detailed compensation and quota attainment data to help them choose the right employer. Needless to say, there's a direct overlap between the questions I've been asking on this podcast and the work Ryan is doing at RepVue. So I'm particularly excited to get his thoughts and find out firsthand how he thinks you should pick your next sales employer. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment if you have questions or feedback. If you're joining us from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please drop us a review and let us know what you think of the episode. This is much appreciated. Without further ado, let's dive in and get his thoughts. Ryan, thanks for joining me and welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro and thanks for having me. Excited to talk about these things. And yes, very relevant to what we do at RepVue.
Yeah, it shouldn't have taken this long for me to get you on here. I mean, you know, I comment on so many of your posts because just like every time they come out, I'm like, this is exactly like the thing that I'm talking about, exactly the thing that I'm thinking about. And it's taken a while for me. I mean, it took most of my career to sort of wrap my head around what a lot of these problems are. But you've brought in so much visibility to the space. I mean, everyone uses RepVue now. It's just part of like standard operating procedure before picking a job. At least if it's not, it should be. So if anyone if you're just hearing about this for the first time, go to RepVue.com and find out who you might be working for, or submit your info so you can help other people figure out what's going on at your employer. But without further ado, let's jump in. You know, I've got 6 questions here, and we're going to end with diving into RepVue and some advice that you have for job seekers today. I imagine you've probably got some interesting and unique takes there. But let's start at the top. I want to start with the broken outbound model, and the way that I've changed the way that I'm asking this question because we got so many consistent answers. What I was basically asking people is what's broken, you know, with B2B outbound and how did we get here? And you can answer that if you want to, but I'll just tell you that we've gotten so many of the same answers that I think we are all as an industry quite well aligned. So I'll just sort of summarize for you. And if you want to sort of, you know, correct that, you can. But then I have a new way of answering the question, which is really going forward into, you know, what's working today, right? Like what's actually changed and what's working. That's where I'm trying to focus the conversation today. But I'll go back a little bit just to recap. Most of the answers have basically been around the fact that we've sort of stepped away from the fundamentals of sales. We've probably gotten too reliant on automations, and we've somewhat created, and I'm sort of putting this in my own words here, but what it generally sounds like when I sort of summarize what everyone's been saying is it seems like we've created a new generation of salesperson who didn't go through, you know, the cold calling or the brutal, you have to pick up the phone 100 times a day. And so it's created somewhat of almost like a handicap, right? Where you're sort of just relying on these tools. And then when it comes time to actually have to figure out how to talk about your product or get into a challenging cold call or whatnot, sort of the foot comes off the gas, so to speak. But there's probably a lot more that goes into it. So wherever you want to go on that, if you want to talk about what's broken with it, what's changed, what's working, anywhere you want to go on that topic, I'm curious to get your thoughts.
I mean, I think a lot of that's right. I think that, you know, and I haven't listened to all the shows, but, you know, there's so much outbound because everybody's building a tool to make it super easy to go outbound, whether it's dialers or cadence tools, even back, you know, 10 years ago when the cadence tools were kind of coming up to some of the AI stuff now. It just makes it now not only can you do the cadence, but you can do the research very quickly and easily with the cadence and the personalization with the cadence. So it's just like, you know, and I think there's more of like a generational conversation to be had around like who are the buyers and what is their behavior and how are they picking up the phone, and do they have a desk phone? Do they have an office phone? Is it just cell phones? And, you know, so kind of like me, and then I'm from the generation that came up and it's like, yeah, activity metrics. Did you hit your cold call numbers? Did you, we used to, back in the day, it was like every morning you would literally come up, if you're an SDR, this is like, we had SDRs in like 2007. you came up to the team meeting. I had one op yesterday. I had zero ops yesterday. I had one op yet. Like this is just the way it was. People
Yeah.
today would be like, "Oh my God, I got to go up and say that I'd got nothing." And it's like,
We
well,
used to have to run up and actually mark it on a board. We had like
yeah,
chalk paper board, and we
yeah,
had dashboards and stuff. But yeah, that was part of the fun. Was like
yeah.
counting those numbers.
Yeah. Not to go way off track, but I think the challenges is just so much being bombarded at people, and it's way too easy to do out. I don't think I never like to say anything's dead, so I don't think anything is necessarily dead from a like outbound perspective. But I think where we're going and like what people expect and what's working, and RepVue, we run a sales organization. We're small, but like we know what's working for us. What's working for us is brand has been working really, really well for us. And obviously, like when you think about brand, you think about RepVue, you think like, all right, well, like users and people go research that's a kind of a different part of our brand. Our brand is like we have two products. One product is for generally hiring managers, right? Helping companies hire people. And then we have a data business. And so where we sell data on the effectiveness of, how our sales or how well run our sales orgs basically, right? So that's useful to consultants and investors and people like that. So we sell that business as well. So we've really leaned into like, kind of brand messaging on LinkedIn and X as well. And on X, it's more around data. On LinkedIn, because that's where our prospects hang out. On LinkedIn, it's more around the hiring side. That's where our prospects hang out, right? So I think like for us, brand awareness is really, really important. For me as a founder and CEO, personal brand is really, really valuable to us. And I think that, oh, well, that's just because it's not just because RepVue, it's just because I think the voice of the human instead of the voice of the company is way more like I get way more action posting the exact same thing than our company, you know, profile does on either channel, right? And I think part of my following is, we have a pretty big following on our company channel too, and it's just because people want to engage and interact, and all that is just this brand awareness. And then so what you have is now you're setting yourself up for when you do go outbound, right? That you're just laying that foundation. I think people are leaning in so heavily on this, like automate this and, put in the personalization, and then you can just kick it and automate. It's like you become less efficient at it. And so the response to being less efficient is do more of it. And I think that's the problem. Like, why don't we solve the problem of why we're less efficient, right? Like we can go send emails. If people have heard of you, your emails are going to get a better response rate. They're going to get a better open rate. They're going to get versus something cold. So, it's hard out there right now. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, right? Like for a lot of sellers and with the noise of all the outbound, it is hard. But I think we see the brand kind of marketing strategy for us as air cover, like significant air cover for the sales efforts that we provide. So not only does it maybe take what would historically be a cold engage outreach to make it a little bit more warm, and then it also will drive those folks who might be warm over the edge to maybe reach out to us. It's kind of like pushing that forward, and we push that forward with a lot of our brand kind of marketing efforts.
Yeah, well, you've been crushing it with brand. I mean, I've used you as an example with countless people I've talked to. When I talk to founders and they're talking about, should I be on LinkedIn? Should I be active? And I don't even think it's a question anymore of if you can or should. Like, you have to, right? I think if people are not seeing the leader of the company, it's hard to really know what the brand is today, because I feel that we're sort of now connecting the people to the brand. Like, I think you just sort of said that there. It's like the people are the brand. And we've seen this happen, with a lot of top startups even in the sales space, selling sales tools. A lot of them have built their brand based on the people who were on their team sharing lots of content. Sometimes those people leave the company and it's like the brand went with them, right? You see sort of like all that momentum just sort of went away with them. And so, I mean, I guess there's a double-edged sword there. Like, you need to keep building it and not lose it. But that's a strong testament to why the CEO should really be doing that, because at least you're not going to walk out the door on your own, on your own company. So, but kudos to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes I see people that are posting on LinkedIn a lot. If you want to call them influencers, is fine. And maybe they post pretty decent stuff, and that's cool. And I actually I forget where they work, and I think, oh, they work there. But so there has to be a balance too of like, like, and it's cool. Like if somebody on my team was like, hey, I'm really focused on my personal brand, that's great. Have at it. Like do it. Let's see if we can integrate some of that to rise, the rising tide
Mm.
effect. And then I don't know where this stops, but as a CEO, like I'm also like our only SDR, not necessarily we have, and most effective, right? And it's like, well,
Mm.
you're spending your time doing that, and how useful is that of your time? I'm like, well, revenue's pretty useful, right?
I'd
To
argue it's
the
super
company.
useful. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd argue it's
So
more useful than doing what most CEOs do, which is constantly talking about preparing for the next board meeting or
right.
talking to the investors. I mean, they almost disappear into investor land like at least 50% of the time.
Yeah,
Once they're raising around, it's like 100%. They're basically nowhere
right.
to be found. Right. So,
Yeah, and and it is like no bones about it. Like I will get a better response rate just because I'm the CEO, and it's like, well, we're going to lean into that. Like I'm gonna like give me your 20 prospects that you want me to hit this week, and I will do the email with the subject line that says CEO intro, whatever we'll so I think like that's part of that personal brand effect as well. It's like they've heard of RepVue, that I have a personal brand presence out there. That's the only reason we do it. I don't have a big ego to like, I don't need a follow. I want to grow a
yeah.
business and I want to be successful with RepVue. Before RepVue, I had minimal followers and I rarely posted on LinkedIn. And the reason was my buyers weren't there,
Yeah.
right? The audience wasn't there for us. And so I didn't do it. Right now that they are, I'll do it. And if maybe after a rep view or I go work somewhere else, if the buyers are on some place, I will be there. That's
Yeah.
where I'll be. Yeah.
Dude, you hit the nail on the head. I actually just put out a tweet yesterday evening on that topic. I was saying, like, I notice there's a lot of people becoming, sales influencers, for lack of a better word, sales creators, whatever you want to call it. And look, good. Everyone, you want to have fun, you want to make content, you want to make money. Good, good, good. I cheer everyone on. I'm not against anything. I'm not gonna, some people are like, well, they're not qualified or good. Go do what you want to do. You want to sell courses, try. But I do think that there should be some sort of revenue connection to what you're spending all of your time on, especially for a salesperson. And I find that to be a little bit sort of hypocritical, or not hypocritical, but just sort of contradictory when you see salespeople that are now sort of labeling themselves as a sales creator, but they have nothing to sell to salespeople. And the product they sell is targeting a completely different audience. I cheer them on. It's like, I like seeing people getting out there and making content, but it's like maybe you want to make something that targets your ICP, right?
Yeah.
Unless you have a plan to maybe someday, get into that space. But it was the same for me when I sold at doctor.com. I didn't post anything on LinkedIn unless I was hiring and I had a job posting or something. And
Mhm.
when I sold to restaurant owners, I didn't post anything on LinkedIn. It was really when we started selling a phone system to sales teams and
Yeah.
recruiting lots of salespeople that I sort of got into it. But yeah,
Yeah.
to the point you made before, I'll just throw in one comment about you mentioned that like could someone potentially be creating lots of content, lots of value, but it's not tying back to the company they're working for at all? I think there's really probably one easy fix to that. I mean, assuming the content is relative to the audience, it's really what's in your headline, I think.
Mhm.
Now my headline is like this big complex like list of a bunch of accomplishments, but when I have a full-time job, it'll just say VP sales at Aircall. Like that's
Mhm.
it, because I want my name and that title. And then everyone started to know about Aircall because in New York I was posting all this sort of stuff, and our name sort of become more recognized. So I think
Yeah.
that's important. Keep that in there because you want to tie everything you're doing back to the brand. You want people saying like, "Oh, what's Aircall?" or "Oh, what's RepVue?" And then they
Yeah.
go look, right? You want that curiosity. Whereas, if you have a headline like mine when you're self-employed or something, I mean, the name of my company's my name, so I'm not going to like put, consultant at Collin Cadmus LLC and whatnot. But I
Yeah.
probably should have a brand name for that reason.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Richard Harris actually made a joke with me. He's like, your brand is your name. Like, why would you build another brand? And I thought about that. I'm like, shit, I'm starting a consulting company. Like, it's almost like starting from scratch from a brand if I give it a new name. So I went
Yeah.
that route. But I want to get your thoughts on growth at all cost. And, let's maybe chat a little bit about how you've put, your company together. I actually don't know, if you've bootstrapped, if you've raised anything, but what are your thoughts with what's going on there? I mean, I've seen sort of a divergence in the market. I think think part of it's been sort of just pressured by the cost of money and, the
Yeah.
pandemic and everything that's gone on there. But do you see sort of a new way, it's sort of paving a trail to a new way here where people are, maybe finding ways to build the next potentially billion-dollar company without, going the whole VC route?
It's gonna be hard. Just a little background. We have raised money at RepVue. We're VC backed. Raised about 6 million, six and change. So not a ton, but we've raised some money.
How early did you raise, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, we raised a more or less $1 million. We had $1 million. We had a little bit of kind of angel stuff, but $1 million round
Okay.
in 2021, and then a $5 million round in 2022. Kind of
Got it. Got it.
first
Okay.
half.
So you
First
did
half.
start by raising some money. Got it. Well,
Yeah,
that makes
I mean,
sense given the quality of execution. If you had bootstrapped that, I would have been wildly confused as to how.
yeah. I mean, I'd kind of self-funded it for a couple of years, just as we were in the very early days, and then we technically we came out of beta in beginning of 2020, and
Okay.
then raised the first round, the $1 million round in early 21, and then 5 million in early 22.
Okay. So you got it off the ground on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Basically, just a quick aside on that. I mean, I spent about 4 hours a day for a year personally one-on-one messaging people on LinkedIn to get enough early users to kind of drive the network effect going, right? And so just as a reminder to founders that, you have to really have your sleeves rolled up for many of these companies that you want to build, even in the age of AI, which we might talk about a little bit later. But the growth at all costs. I'll just kind of maybe a slightly contrarian take there. We've never left growth at all costs, right? It's still growth at all costs, and I'm coming at it from a company that's taken venture capital dollars. Like if you never take venture capital dollars, it doesn't really matter, right? You kind of have to be profitable, right? You have to make money. If it's your business, you need to make money, right? Like millions and millions of businesses in the U.S., most of them make money, right? And that's how they stay afloat. But if you're a venture capital backed business, we never left growth at all costs. The difference is it used to be growth at all costs, and we're going to give you as much money as you need. And now it's growth at all costs, and we're not giving you any money, right? And so it's like, well, what do I do? Well, if you want the business to still be around, you kind of need to be profitable in some way or close to it or cash flow break even. And so that's this big kind of shift of like, oh, it's this profitable thing. Like, I talk to investors all the time. We're not fundraising now, but I still talk to investors all the time. Like growth is by orders of magnitude is more important than profitability, right? Profitability is only moderately interesting if you're still growing, like pretty meaningfully still growing.
From
Like
an
in this,
investor perspective.
from an investor's perspective, right?
Like
So
if you're starting a lifestyle business or whatnot.
absolutely, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Like if it's yes, fully agree. So if you're starting a life, like that's great. Like make money, don't have to grow. You don't have the pressure, the stress of having investors and grow, 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 grow. And that's a great play for many people. Sometimes I'm like, some days I wake up and I'm like, man, I wish this was like, I didn't have any investors and I could do this and I could do that. And but we needed that money. RepVue is a hard business to start and is a hard business to get to where we are. And it's really hard for me to envision us doing it without it because it's this network effect and users and all this. But the growth at all costs thing is like it's still the most important thing. Like profitability is a far second one. And again, this is just from a venture capital back perspective. It's just you're not getting that money, and you see it now. Like folks post stuff and stats online, or some of these big new AI players they're growing like crazy fast. Like Lovable is a dev app, and they announced last night they grew from 0 to 17 million ARR in 3 months after launch. And they only raised 15. They said we're announcing $15 million raise. Like that's not that much for somebody. Like they could probably raise 100 or more, right? But that's where all the dollars are flowing right now. Are these super fast growth? Many of them are AI related. And so if you're not growing, like I said, if you're profitable, that's great. That's fine. You will be alive. Alive is better than dead in the business world, right? Like so, if you have to stop growing to pull back spend, if you have to pull back spend to rein in profitability, and likely the outcome is you're going to slow growth, you have to do that. Otherwise, the business goes away because nobody's going to give you any more money. So
Yeah.
it's just the reality of what you sign up for when you take a big check. And unfortunately, sometimes when you take that big check, the market changes, which it did since we took, in 2022, the market has totally changed. So, we were to give you a little perspective, we were at 14 employees since like since we raised that round, we were about 14 employees. We were at 14 employees for 30 straight months, like as we kind of grew revenue, because I was like, well, we can't add more, now that the market went down, we're like, well, we have to be really careful with this money or we're going to be dead because they're not going to give us any more money. I mean, they might give us a
Yeah.
little bit more money, but and so that's what kind of we did. We've kind of grown into that, you know, but it's been a tough couple of years for a lot of venture cap backed folks. So
Do you feel the last couple of years has it? I guess it probably hasn't sort of affected you in the same way that it would affect traditional SaaS companies. If anything, maybe the job market being so sort of on fire has been maybe good for your growth. Is that right?
it's an interesting. So there's two parts of our business. The data and consulting business, we sell a lot of data to investors who want to get a read on if the sales org is well run. That business has been pretty successful.
Are you able
And
to make sure they can't sort of just scrape it off your website? That you're able to
correct.
protect it? Yeah.
It's a kind of a different lens. It's the same data, but it's just a different lens to the data. So you wouldn't be able to extract even if you could just go scrape our whole website, you wouldn't be able to extract what they can get from the data and it's obviously fully anonymized, right? From user perspective, there's
Right.
no user information or anything like that. It's just sales stats and metrics, but we just give it a kind of a different lens on it. So that's been unaffected, which has been useful because the hiring market has been bad for a couple of years. For us, when the hiring market is like amazingly great, I think that's good from the standpoint of everybody's hiring, right? So everybody's like, oh, we potentially use RepVue, and we haven't really rolled out our full offering yet on the hiring side. We're kind of in the early beta of this kind of totally transformed go-to-market hiring with an AI-based kind of job matching solution, which probably makes sense to a lot of people since we have all the data on companies and we have user profiles and things like that. So but then the hiring kind of pendulum has swung back where like nobody was high there. Everybody's doing layoffs and like, well, that's potentially good for us because everybody's like, I need to get on RepVue. So kind of in this middle ground, we're kind of waiting to see which way it kind of swings. I think there's a lot of wait and see with like, what's happening with AI and the markets are still a little bit, kind of in a wait and see mode, maybe with the elections recently and things like that. But we're cautiously optimistic about 2025 from a hiring perspective.
Cool. I love it. Let's chat about sales quota attainment. I want to get your thoughts here. Now, I've been saying that sales quota attainment is basically under 40%. I'm curious first at the top of this question, like, has that number changed or would you say that's still sort of the overall average?
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's inched up a little bit. It was kind of right at that 40% number for 6, 7 quarters in a row. It's kind of inched back up to like probably 42. If you look at like a wide swath of well-known, mostly larger tech companies, if on our website in the companies drop down, we have a quarterly report that we put out, it's public. You don't have to sign up for anything or do anything. You can access it, and there's a chart in there that tracks that broad quota attainment metric. So it has inched up a little bit, but it's not near where it was, kind of late 21 timeframe, which was kind of approaching kind of the 50% range, where 50% of the people were hitting quota. Now it's, it was down to like 41, I believe, 40-ish, and then it's been right around 40 for a while. It is inched up just very slightly.
Yeah, I saw your tweet. I think it was today that just went out. It might have been, I saw it today, but might have been for another day. But you were listing off some of the top companies, and it looks like the top ones are in the 60s, right? Like, so yeah, I guess it would make sense that the average is still down where it's at. Why do you think it's so low? I mean, is this an effective over hiring? Is it an effective setting quotas simply too high? Like, what do you think's actually causing that?
Yeah, it is a lot of it is related to what we talked about a minute ago, which is to grow at all costs, right? And so technology companies, and that's particularly most of our data is around technology companies, not exclusively, but for technology companies, they take massive amounts of funding, right? They have, like historically, you go back 10, 15, 20 years, all the big public companies, probably in their early days, they were taking big funding rounds, maybe not as big as some of the stuff we see today. And then now they take funding rounds. And especially in software, it's like, well, what do you do with that money? Why are you giving us this money? We're giving you this money because in 2 years, you're going to raise more at a much, much bigger valuation. Well, how do we get there? Well, we grow significantly. So what do we do with the money? We got to hire a bunch of salespeople, right? Let's hire all these salespeople. And so you're funding it. You're losing tons of money, by the way. You're hemorrhaging, on the P&L is really bad. And that's fine because
they literally call it a burn rate. I know that's common knowledge to us, but to the people listening, some of you may not know, like these companies literally have what's called a burn rate, which is how much money they are actually losing every month, which is the opposite of what you really want a business to do in the end game. So it takes a bit of getting used to.
Right. Yeah. So you just hire all these salespeople, and because you have all this money in the burn rate, right? The value of getting another 100 salespeople at 65% quota attainment in terms of what they can grow to the business, what they can add in growth to the business is worth it, right? Like, so you have that dynamic, and then you just overhire, right? I need to grow to get from A to B, and to get from A to B, I need, I run all the math. If everybody hits their number, I need 80 salespeople. Let's hire 150 salespeople, right? And then maybe we can get from A to B plus something, or probably not all going to work out, and maybe we're overhiring. So you just overhire and overhire. And there's a little less regard in that whole equation for what can the market support for my current products and services, right? So like we see every company, and I have so many charts of companies on RepVue where the quota attainment in these early stage companies is amazing. It's great. Everybody loves working there, and it always kind of flattens out, and then the RepVue score starts to dip. And it doesn't mean it's a terrible company. It just means you've hit that inflection point. At some point, you're working in your company needs to hire more salespeople because it have all this untapped greenfield market, as they call it. But you will run it at some point. Every company runs out of that, right? Like, Salesforce might say, "What's your addressable market?" Anybody that has a customer. Okay, well, maybe, but maybe not, right? Like, like it's not everybody that has a customer, right? But that's how it's presented, and so like, you can't hire to this, kind of dream addressable market and expect it to work out all the time. And sometimes it's hard to know when that limit is. You just start seeing it in the metrics, and
usually when it's too late, right?
Well, usually when it's too late, as in like, well, now I have 400 salespeople and 32% are hitting quota, and my culture's degrading because people are unhappy because they're simply unhappy. It doesn't matter how much free coffee they get. They're unhappy because they don't have a clear path to winning in that role. So that's the quota attainment in tech historical challenge has been this capacity fueled by outsized funding for unprofitable companies over hiring to get to that next kind of stage of growth. Well,
kudos to you, because I think if we were to say who's made the greatest positive impact on all of this stuff, it's got to be you. I mean, putting this data out there. I mean, I like to complain and make, voice my opinions and stuff, but it's not helping anyone. So maybe bringing a little bit of awareness, but you're arming them with what they need to actually sort of avoid getting into these types of situations, right? And what I think it's doing, well, it's definitely doing, and the effect that it'll have long term, I don't want to say it's similar to Yelp with restaurants, but it applies a certain level of accountability to these companies, which I think we just need way more of, in this world. Is a lot of like, let's praise everyone when things go right, but there's not really, or at least before sort of LinkedIn and everyone venting and sharing their opinions, and now websites like RepVue, it wasn't really much of an opportunity to sort of share those experiences of like all that's gone wrong. And that's why so many of us, over the last 10, 15 years, just, we get excited, we get these job offers, we jump in there, and it's just like the same story on repeat, people learning these lessons. But I feel like now the sentiment seems different. Like it seems like people are aware of these things. They're doing research. They're trying to find out answers to these questions. And I'm constantly hearing or just seeing people talk on LinkedIn about, suggesting these types of questions to ask before accepting a job. Like the fact that that's even in the narrative today, like give yourself a
Yep.
pat on the back, man, because you've played arguably the biggest role, I think, in that. And anyone who's been helping, build your brand has had a hand in that. So it's the only thing we can do. I've thought so long about how do we solve these problems. The first thing that comes to mind is the obvious, like, well, we need a union, right? You need someone to advocate for you. But then I kind of think the unions end up getting manipulated too, because once you sort of centralize everyone, you kind of just need to manipulate the leader. And then you can
Yeah.
sort of manipulate the whole group, and it just turns into like a whole different game of bad. So I think transparency is the path forward, and having a voice is the path forward. So LinkedIn helps with that. But being able to go in and actually put your numbers into RepVue, and it's like, they have to live with that reputation now.
Yep.
But I do have one question I want to throw in
Yeah.
here, actually, that I meant to ask a little earlier, because I have spent a lot of time sort of just, when I'm running or whatever, just thinking about this, because everything that you're doing, like I've said, it's providing the lens into what people need to make the right decisions. Is there a way to take it to the next level? Is there a way where you can actually verify people's sales performance? I imagine you've thought of that. I don't want to go too off track here, but I
Yeah.
am curious if you've got secrets up your sleeve you don't want to share. Feel free to keep them there. But have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's various orgs have taken a crack at that over the years, and it's like, well, you could upload your W-2, right?
That's what I thought. Yeah,
People
but it
don't
doesn't
really
tell
want
you
to do
much,
that.
right?
We don't really want people's W-2s. It's just too much information. Like
Yeah.
we just I don't we haven't, we're already dealing with users. Just email addresses is enough, like from a
Mm.
privacy standpoint. We don't want their W-2s. And then, so I've seen like, oh, send us a picture of your president's club kind of thing, you at the president's club or your award or something. And it's like, what do we do with that?
And you
I
could
think at the end of
Photoshop
the
it.
day, yeah, I think at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we get really good submissions around the data we get. We trust it very significantly because the way that we structure the data. We're not like people are like, well, how do you like you've got this percent of team members who hit quota, like everybody's going to say yes, they hit quota. And we're like, yes, that's why we don't ask, did you hit quota? Because everybody will say yes. We ask like typically what's the percent of your team that hits quota,
Mm.
right? Doesn't matter if you hit quota, right?
And you're
We just want to,
verifying that they're a legitimate LinkedIn like person,
yes.
right?
And we
So that's where
verify
it's
that they,
different than
yeah,
Glassdoor, because Glassdoor employers can go
yes.
in and just rack up positive reviews, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we just verify based on social media stuff, usually like, did they work at that company in the role when they said they worked there? And
Okay,
then,
so that's very hard to game. Now, what you could do and what companies probably should do is promote to their company, like go on RepVue, put your information in,
Mhm.
and that's what we used to do at Glassdoor, with Glassdoor when I was leading teams, because we were confident that most of them would leave good positive reviews. So we would just encourage everyone to go do it. But I do know that on Glassdoor specifically, like there's plenty of people out there who just go in and write 100 positive reviews, and you can
Yeah.
totally tell. But yeah, if you're verifying through LinkedIn, I mean, the
Yep.
most someone could do is write one false review. Like they can't do that in bulk. So yeah,
Right.
that's a good point.
Yeah, the data is and we see that occasionally, like a whole bunch of submissions come in from a very specific kind of random company in a
Mm.
day. It doesn't happen that often. Maybe once every 6 weeks or something, we'll just see something really random. And so we'll take a look at that and make sure that it's not like we have all kinds of data and systems that are flagging. How long did you spend on the page? Do you have all fives or all ones for these questions? Do you do this? Do you do that? Like that raises it to the level of getting an additional review by our team. But we just have seen like, the fact that the altruistic nature of what we want to do, which is deliver true insights, like has given us a really good read into the actual environment of the orgs. Like they're not all perfect. There's some, oh, it says 60% quota attainment. I was there and it was less than 40. Like, yeah, people tell us that and we're like, well, just make sure and submit your data. And, but directionally, we feel really good about it. And obviously very appreciative to all the salespeople, to your point, who get a lot out of it. So they submit because they're getting so much value, or they're getting value out of it. So they know like garbage in, garbage out, give an honest assessment of what's happening. And that's what we found. And we've been happy to see that.
Yeah, well, the proof's in the pudding, right? Because if data seems like it's just wrong, people won't use it. But people are using RepVue, and every time I've used it, if I hear people, I use it frequently when I see people bragging on LinkedIn about their performance or they're
Yeah.
announcing that they're going to hire all these people. I'm like, okay, well, let me see what the people have to say about that.
Yep.
It tends to feel relatively accurate, right? Like with the exception of maybe some that just haven't had a lot of people reporting data yet, and that's to be expected. And that's just a volume game, right?
Yep.
I'll share with you the one idea that came to my mind in that regard of if there's a way to actually do that. It would probably have to be through partnering with the commission platforms like Spiff or someone who actually has, the actual quota data that can't really
Mhm.
be rigged because they're connecting their payment systems to it and all that stuff. So it would have to sort of, I guess it would have to be accurate. But I mean, that kind of takes you maybe far away from what you're actually focused on today. But I think from the hiring standpoint, there's clearly a market for that if salespeople can have a way of proving their performance. But then again, is it even valuable to say that I did this at this company? It doesn't necessarily mean I can do it at the next and stuff. But yeah, I was
So
curious on that.
yeah, just real quick on that. So we actually just rolled out. So on your profile in RepVue, you can add at the if you have a company, like there's this concept of this candidate profile where when we match you with jobs, it will surface you if we think it's relevant. And within those companies, you can select that you hit quota and you were kind of a trip club sort of or equivalent sort of thing. And so yeah, and then that will be flagged potentially for the hiring people. The reality of it is,
Oh,
the,
so the
the last
hiring managers can search for candidates.
the way the system works is the hiring man a company we've just kind of rolled this out in beta. All the company does is paste a link to a job description in there, and we immediately find the top 100 or
Mm.
top 10
Okay.
candidates. That's it. That's all you have to do. So instead of having to go scour through thousands of LinkedIn profiles, basically like, give us your job, here's your 10 best candidates.
Got it.
And then
Oh,
there's
that's
stuff.
cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. We haven't really fully brought it out to the world yet, but it's something, we've got a few things to clean up around the edges, but it works. We hired 2 account executives at RepVue in January. So we went from 14 to 16 finally, and didn't post a job anywhere publicly, didn't do anything. These are 2 people that we hired. They were not prior to RepVue in anybody's network at our company. So it's not like, oh, I just hired people from my network. Nope. We just used our system, and amazingly, it worked out very, very well. But you back to the question about the kind of the user submitted information. A key recommendation that I have during your job search is don't lie, right? So like if you put on there like, oh, maybe I'll get like more action on the RepVue kind of matching platform if I put I was, hitting quota or I made President's Club, maybe, and well, they're going to ask you about that. So, and then that's probably an immediate disqualifier.
It's like saying you're 6'5" on Tinder when you're 5'5",
Right.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually, you got to show up to the coffee
Yeah.
shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you better be sitting down first or something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Unless you just think your personality is going to make up for it, in which case,
Right.
like all the power to you. But
Right.
yeah, yeah. Well, what do you think's going on with sales average tenure? I mean, is it a different story? We're looking at VPs, CROs, even the AEs, or
Mhm.
it's sort of just this less than 2 year thing that's going on. Is a lot of that just the volatility of these companies, and they're just or is it really tied back to sort of the path of what we've talked on here, which is the quotas and then the growth at all cost and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of 2 different tracks with the VP of sales and then the AEs. And I think, to the VP of sales, a lot of that is just kind of found early stage and founders and not even early stage, just the fit is hard and people get that wrong a lot. You get it wrong a lot on AEs as well. For sales general kind of tenure and where that is right now, everything job changes are about money, right? And you saw actually tenure is actually up quite a bit, the average tenure. So like we can look at Salesforce data, and we collect this data. We have actually a partner named Revelio Labs, and we do some partnerships with them. And so we get some kind of tenure data from them,
Hmm.
and we give them some salary data for some projects they work on. And so looking at, for example, Salesforce, the tenure around 2021 for the kind of the broader sales team there at Salesforce.com was 1.6 years. Okay. And part of that is they were hiring like crazy, right? So that will naturally bring the tenure down. And then they did a riff, right? They famously did like 10,000 riff or more. I can't remember the specifics. Their tenure now is actually 2.7 on the sales team, 2.7 years. So it's up quite a bit. It's up like 65%. And
Which
so
makes
part of
sense,
that,
right? Because they got rid of the bottom performers,
in
essentially,
theory,
right?
I think the other factor that's really important in that tenure increase is that it's about money and you were really confident. Somebody who's throwing you a lot of money. Come, oh, you have 4 years experience at Salesforce. You have 2 years. Come work for us. We're hot startup, or we're this company, we're that company, and we'll give you a massive increase in your OTE or your base, right? Okay, I'll do that. I'll take that risk. Everything was working at the time. Now, right? Nobody's doing that. I mean, very few are. You're just not getting those big dollars like increases thrown at you. So it's safer to stay, right? This is kind of like the
Yeah,
playbook right now. It's like if you have a decent thing and you're not, it's not a total disaster, like there's a lot of wait and see happening right now.
yeah,
And so the money factor, like I said earlier, money drives everything in terms of job hopping or even just switching in general without using hopping. Um, you feel like my path to a higher W-2 in 2025 is if I can stick this out, even if I hit 80%, 85%, like it's safe
yeah,
versus like a flat offer to go somewhere else where there's unknowns and a ramp. And so
yeah.
tenure, so sales attrition at Salesforce is 24% annualized. It was like mid to high 30s a couple of years ago, but right before they did that riff.
Do you know when they measure that? Are they looking at, like, when they remeasure, are they just looking at the people who are there today? How long have they been here on average? Or are they looking at all the people they've hired? Did you see what I mean? There's probably two ways to measure that with two totally different
Yeah,
results.
it's going to be all the people that they've hired.
Okay, so it's a
It's
true number.
everybody, right? So if you go hire 5,000 people next week, your average tenure is going to
Yes,
drop
yes.
significantly. Yep.
Okay,
So
okay.
now that
Because otherwise you can
Salesforce,
fire people and then your average just goes up
yeah,
tomorrow. Yeah,
if you
yeah,
fire the newer folks, yeah, and then they have reaccelerated hiring a little bit on the sales team. They announced some of the agent force stuff and
yeah.
things like that. So you could see that kind of 2.7. I kind of expect it to kind of level out, maybe trend a touch down over the next couple quarters in their sales tenure. And sales tenure makes a difference in terms of performance. The longer tenure, it's just a correlated fact. A more tenured org is going to produce more efficiently and effectively than
Yeah.
than a non-tenured org.
Yeah, and what I've seen in my experience, which is it's still limited, it's just a few companies, right, in comparison to the whole industry. But what I've noticed is that when you have the folks who are sort of just like average, mediocre reps, maybe they're actually not even like good in the beginning, but some of them just stick around because they don't really have any other options, right? And they're like good enough that you don't fire them. They're not great. They're just sort of there. What I've
Yeah,
seen is that long term, those become some of the most valuable people on the team because they stay so long that even though they're not like this natural born, like, ace number 10 on the team, they acquire so much knowledge by just being there. And
hmm,
everyone else just keeps coming and going, coming and going. And so even if you have your best reps in and out the door every couple years, because maybe they're leaving for more money or whatever, but you have sort of those average like B players, but now they have
yeah,
5, 6, 7 years experience on your team. They know every answer to every question. They've been in every scenario a bunch of times. They
yeah,
start coaching other reps on the teams. And I've seen those people become managers simply
hmm,
because they've been there long enough and they've acquired enough knowledge, not because they were the best on the team. It just sort of
right,
happens over time. So, I actually wrote a
yeah,
post about that today, just saying like
yeah,
grass isn't always greener, right? Like if you're making money, you're hitting quota, you're getting training, you're evolving, like maybe just
hmm,
stay put, right?
yeah,
Maybe just
yeah,
keep
and
going.
that, yeah, I've talked about that before, which assuming I agree with all that, and would just add the kind of the asterisks of like they can be, and you kind of reference this like helping others, like the kind of the culture banner carriers as
Mm.
well, right? Like
Yeah,
they're fully
yeah.
bought into the culture, and so it just does really uplift the overall team environment when you have those folks who are fully bought in. And yeah, they might not be hitting 140% every year, but they're doing well, they're respected, and yeah, great group of folks, that kind of cohort if you can have them on a team.
Yeah, and they're loyal too. And what I've seen, at least in my experience with some of these folks, is that their confidence tends to shine actually when the better people on the team have left. And now they're like the senior, right? It's sort of like those timid freshmen in high school who maybe wouldn't talk to anyone. But by the time they're a senior and now their little brother's a freshman, they're
Yeah.
walking around the hallways with sort of some different, level of confidence. Like, so sometimes time just really will make magic happen. So I do encourage
Yep.
people to be patient in your careers and remember that you're going to be working for 40 or 50 years, right? You don't
Hmm.
need to be promoted or find a new job every 2 years necessarily.
Right.
But okay, let's jump into AI, and then I want to just sort of get your top tips on what you think employees should be doing when they're looking for
Yeah.
jobs. But what do you think's going on with AI, man? I mean, are salespeople getting replaced? Is it more of a tool that
Yeah.
it's an arrow in our quiver, so to speak? What do you think's
Yeah.
going on?
So first of all, we make extensive use of AI at our company in our internal operations and everything we do, and it is going to be transformative to business. And I tell my kids, my son who's 17 years old too. I'm like, you need to be leaning into this stuff if you want to be an effective member of the workforce in the coming years, right? Like
Do you
I
want to
think
get
like
into sales?
he may, I don't know.
A little early to know.
Yeah, it's a little early, I think he may. He's a bright kid. But I think even like to that point, like schools, why you should be teaching like the test should be not write the paper on this thing. It should be write a prompt that will write the best paper on this thing, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
that's where everything is going, right?
Yeah.
Sales is actually a little bit tricky in terms of AI, and I do not believe like there's a lot of reasons why like immediately in the short term, like you're not going to be replaced by AI. However, AI is going to make you so much better at sales. AI is not going to make you any better at sales. But what AI can do is AI can take a lot of the crap work that you've been doing off your plate to allow you more time to say it, to actually sell and
Yeah.
be doing the high value activities, right? So back in the day in my early sales career, right? Everybody's heard of this, right? It's like you would get sometimes referred to as a quarterback of a deal, right? Like the quarterback, and then be the grizzled old vet. This is when I was in my younger days as the grizzled old vet, the quarterbacks we used to call them, and they would just really, we used to think they would really do nothing, right? They're probably good at golf, not that that's a bad thing. I like playing golf too, but really good at golf. They knew their way around a steak dinner, and they brought the solution consultant does this other person does this person will schedule the meeting, this person will do this, somebody helps me with procurement, oh I got legal. Right now, like think of it like almost in the same ways, like the quarterback. All this other stuff can be done by AI, right?
Yeah.
Like today, and you can be the quarterback. What I think about it all the time. I want, like, for me personally, as we're a small company, we have to do a bunch of crap all the time. Like, how can I get rid of all that stuff I'm doing? I want to be on the phone all day,
Yeah.
right? Like, I just want to be on the phone. I want to be selling, talking to customers, selling, closing, whatever. And because that's where I'm comfortable and we know we're good at it, we've got, product market fit, this and that. And so from an AI perspective, like somebody's got to figure all this stuff out. I did a post on Twitter a few weeks ago. It's basically like, the AI is like your assistant that just follows you around everywhere. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, that sounded like a great call. I've adjusted the stage. Oh, and I scheduled the demo for next Tuesday. I invited their team and our team. And here's a new person that was on the call that we hadn't talked with before. Here's a brief about that person. And then it's like, oh, based on the timing, this deal's not going to close this month. There's only a 10% chance. So I adjust the close date. Here's your next call, and here's the call brief, and things like that. Like all that stuff where it's like your assistant that does all that. You still have to sell. And so I think we're in this phase in sales where it's like nobody's there. And the problem is there's all these different systems. You got your CRM, you got your call recorder thing like a Gong or something. You've got, your HubSpots, you've got all these, and somebody's got to stitch all that together, right?
Yeah.
Or does Salesforce or a HubSpot, do they just kind of become that, but it's got to touch all these other systems? And that's part of the challenge with the sales function is that so many disparate tools for so many different things that, oh, well, we've got an integration to this, and this has got an integration to this, and this has got an integration. It just makes it difficult. But I'm like exceptionally bullish on AI. We use it for sales use cases, like a lot of like whether it's research or like filling out. We get these questionnaires that we have to fill out. It does it in 10 seconds instead of 3 hours. And prospect research, right? And so almost think like when you think about AI, like, but I don't like sales calls. No, like I don't answer the phone anyways, but if it's a bot, first of all, AI, you're not allowed to call without
Yeah.
permission. So you can't do cold calls, right? Well, and if I fill out a thing on the web form and it's an AI bot, like I don't really want to do that. Just add two more questions to your web form and I'll add that information too. Just get me to talk to a person if I want to talk to a person. So
Yeah.
um, I feel good about sales and like will it put pressure? Like, do we need to hire? I already know most other functions. We can do what we're doing with hiring less people, possibly.
Yeah.
So you better be really good at your job and you better be the one. You're not going to get replaced by AI. You're going to get replaced by somebody who's better at using AI is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Uh, and that goes for every function, not just sales. But I think in other functions, like it's already happening. So, you know,
I'm
it,
with you totally. I think it's not going to replace the role, but it'll certainly reduce the size teams. And it's going to replace the worst people on the team because the better people are just going to be able to do
yeah,
more. And
yeah,
yeah, I remember reading your tweet and sort of like where I think a lot of this is headed. It's just much bigger than sales. It's just that we're going to be living a life where we just don't do things we don't want to do because it's going to be done for us. And I
right.
think a good way to maybe think about it and sort of envision where we're headed is that, today we live in a world where we tell Alexa to like do this. But I think we're going to be waking up in a world soon where, and I'm using Alexa just as an
Yeah,
as an overarching AI name, but we're going to live in a world soon where you wake up and Alexa tells you all the things she did for you and what you need to do for the day because she already knows, already prepared it, or like
yeah.
to the point where it's like you said, you just want to get on that call and run that meeting. And I think if you just look at like really wealthy people who have all these assistants and handlers around them, it's kind of like AI should be over time filling all of those gaps and
Mhm.
we all wake up and it's just like ready to go, right? And
Yep.
you just know how to spend your time for the day. So, okay, cool. So last question. I mean, you've been doing this for 7 years now. You probably have inside of your brain more data, more thoughts on all of this than any of us because you're living in it literally every single day, whereas I'll talk about it about once a week. So what is your top advice today for job seekers? Aside from obviously go to RepVue, do your research. Do you have top questions, any sort of top hits that are not necessarily
Well,
the mainstream?
yeah, I post about this a lot, so I'll just kind of pick one that may be underrated or under the radar, which is like I think that a lot of times, especially folks that have been in a job search for more than a short period of time and maybe getting a little bit frustrated, but you still have to show, I think it's really important to show why this role that you're interested in is applicable to you. Like, why are you interested? Why do you think you'll be a good fit for this specific role at this specific company, right? And I see this like it really stands out to me, whether it's on behalf of in the past companies where we're doing a lot of hiring, or just some of our customers now, like and just talking to recruiters a lot, is like it just makes such a huge difference if you've got a little bit of customization and personalization, right? And understanding. And I don't, you could say, oh, AI could do that. Sort of, yeah, but it probably could. But like just have some conviction in whether it's something related to the problem that they solve, the market where you have experience, something you've done in the past where you think that this is what ultimately sets you apart as a candidate. Because the issue is recruiters, the biggest problem, and we're trying to help solve this, is that they might post a role like I think it was maybe our folks over at HubSpot told us like they got like 5,800 resumes in 24 hours for a account executive role that they posted, right? Like if one recruiter is assigned to that, what do they do with that, right? Like, and how do and so first of all, depending on how much you personalize, so like how do you, set yourself aside, set yourself apart, which is through like that personalization. And then obviously, like I know this is said a lot, but like the extent that getting stuck in the ATS, the applicant tracking system, is not really going to benefit you that much. So the networking with not the recruiter, but the hiring team, the hiring manager, right? That's so many people don't do that still, right? Like so many people don't go and do something a little different, right? That message I said, be personalized about that, like why you'd be a good fit. do it in a LinkedIn voice chat, right? Like in the DM, do a DM voice chat. Like anything that sets you apart a little bit. It just kind of like sets your flag a little higher than everybody else's flag. Like the voice chat or a video chat, a little Loom video or something that you can do that communicates that message that separates you, or that like this is why I'm uniquely qualified, not for a sales role, but for your sales role. And if you do that, and I think the last thing I'll say, this is like a couple pieces of advice, but like, and people ask me all the time, oh, I'm stuck. What should I do? I get a lot of DMs on LinkedIn, as you probably imagine, but a lot of it is just like, look, don't give up, keep going. Like it sometimes it takes a long time. It takes a lot of applications. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
attempts, and just keep going. Don't give up, keep doing it.
Actually, I was back in LinkedIn keeps a history of every job you've ever applied for. And I uncovered that recently and saw that for my first sales job, I'd applied 4 times
Hmm.
over the course of like 3 or 4 or 5 months. And I didn't even know that, like, because I didn't remember, because I had applied probably to so many jobs in that time period.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you. And I eventually got the job, right? And it wasn't even like they knew that they ignored me. It was just that it took 3 or 4 times to eventually, come across someone's desk, get their attention. So
Yep. Yep.
totally
Yep.
with you.
Awesome.
Well, if for anyone who's listening, if you haven't already, if you're a salesperson, go on to repvue.com and plug in your numbers, right? Fill out what is it, a survey? What do you call
Rating.
it
Yeah,
there?
we call it a rating. Yep.
Rating. So put in your rating and help the world, and then start doing some research before you pick your next employer. I've also got follow Ryan on LinkedIn. He's also on Twitter or X. Anywhere else? Anything else you want to plug in there? Are you guys hiring for any roles? Anything?
We're not hiring. We've got probably 1,200 at RepVue, but there's probably 1,200 sales roles live on our website right now through mostly very well-known sales organizations, tech sales orgs. So there are tons of jobs on there. There's this concept of, we have this candidate profile, which is in beta. So if you're looking for a role, make sure to like fully fill out a candidate profile.
So that's a great way to stand out today, because probably
Mhm.
not many people doing it yet, right?
Right. Yeah. That we've got a couple 100,000 users, probably only, 5% of them right now have one of those, which will help them. So if you're a user, go fill that out. And we got some really cool stuff coming on that front. In the next.
If they have a job posting on your site, does that mean that they put it there, they're working with you? It's not like you just took it and reposted it, right? Like they're actively on the site.
Yeah, I would say there are a few that we've just put out there, but probably maybe 10% of those.
Got it.
So
Cool.
if you're an employer want to hire and you have a profile on our website, you can go and list 2 jobs for free on our site. And then you'll see a bunch of employers that might have 20 or 30 sales jobs on our site. Those are some of our customers as well. But any company that has a profile on our site can list two jobs for free. And anybody that's a user can apply for those jobs, right? It's not like we're not like some total walled garden or anything like that. Like you don't have to have this profile and get matched. Like that, there will always be the ability just to apply for jobs that you think you're a good fit for.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. It's definitely made, like I said, I think the biggest impact throughout the industry that I've seen in regards to all of these problems. Transparency really is just it's the path forward. So
Thank
more
you.
is better. So everyone get out there, fill it out, tell your team about it, and go follow Ryan. And thanks for joining me. This was long overdue, and I had a great time.
Yeah. Thanks, Colin. Good stuff.
Likewise.
Appreciate it.